About 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that, there was a prospect working in WWE developmental named Roman Reigns. Now, if you were to build the perfect professional wrestler, this dude would be it. He had the look that would guarantee that female fans would love him, and theoretically, he was believable enough to where the hardcore male fan base would buy into him. Vince McMahon, he loved Roman Reigns. I mean, he loved him. He calls him up to the main roster along with two other dudes in a group called The Shield. Now, instead of allowing the audience to get used to him, instead of allowing Roman Reigns time to build a natural connection with the audience, Vince McMahon, he starts shoving Roman Reigns down their throat. Kids winning world titles, headlining WrestleMania within his first couple of years on the main roster. Now, in the eyes of Vince McMahon, Roman Reigns, he was supposed to be the guy that carried the company. Matter of fact, I think they even started calling him that, the guy. He was supposed to take over for John Cena as the new face of WWE. There was just one problem, one tiny problem. The WWE audience, they outright rejected him. They hated this dude with a passion. It was a case of the company giving someone too much too soon. Oftentimes, when you try to force people to accept and like someone, the opposite of what you want to happen happens. You force people to like someone, so they hate him. Eventually, I think Roman Reigns ended up winning over the WWE audience. I believe he eventually won their respect. I know some of you guys still watch the product, so maybe you can confirm that for me. But earlier this afternoon, when I saw this headline from Outkick about Pat McAfee, it immediately made me think of Roman Reigns and his struggle to win over the WWE audience. Headline over at Outkick: College Gameday fans hate Pat McAfee, but are they wrong? Now, this article was written by David Hookstead. It was based on a poll that was conducted by The Athletic. Now, usually I don't put too much stock into polls. The only consistent thing about polls is that they're consistently unreliable. Back in 2016, most polls had Donald Trump, Orange Man bad. Most polls had the Trumper losing the election to Hillary Clinton. Now, according to Hill, the only reason Trump won was because he had assistance from his good friend Vlad, the same Vlad who spent 10 months with one of America's favorite dump divers, Bob Greiner. I don't trust most polls because you really don't have any idea who they're polling. If you polled 100 shit fucks and asked them if the Biden economy is booming, 100% of respondents would say yes. Woke welfare checks, they've never been higher. Government assistance, it has now become government reliance. Now, if you asked 100 business owners if the Biden economy was booming, vast majority of them would say no. Polls can be easily manipulated to fit whatever narrative the group conducting the poll is framing. But this particular poll, this poll from The Athletic, highlighting the unpopularity of Pat McAfee at ESPN, this particular poll I believe. Why? Because I have other evidence that backs it up. The Athletic, they asked their readers whether or not they liked Pat McAfee on College Gameday. Now, Pat McAfee, he joined the show last year. He has been heavily featured this season, so I guess so ESPN can justify his massive contract. Now, I used to watch College Gameday every Saturday morning, but I have not watched the show in years. When the show was about a group of guys, mostly former college athletes along with Lee Corso, and they were discussing college football, I watched the show. But over the last 5 or so years, College Gameday, it seems to have turned into a circus. It's becoming less and less about football and more about goofy antics designed to entertain the audience, which I don't find to be entertaining at all. They bring these celebrity guests on. Now, some of them are good. You can tell that some of these celebrity guests actually watch college football and they can have an intelligent conversation about it. But there are other celebrity guests who have no business being there. But that's fine. That's fine. Show is still doing really well for ESPN. Matter of fact, last weekend they drew over 2 million viewers. Outside of live sports, nothing else is drawing 1 million viewers at ESPN or even close to that number, much less 2 million. But if you were to believe The Athletic, I am not the only one who doesn't like the direction of College Gameday. According to The Athletic, Almost 50% of the people polled hate Pat McAfee on College Gameday. 30% of the respondents were supportive of Pat McAfee. Over 20% had no opinion about him at all. Now, to me, that is the most glaring number. Yeah, having half the audience hate you, not necessarily a good thing, but in the business of entertainment, whether the audience loves or loathes you, it really doesn't matter. You just want them to feel something. During his prime in the 80s and 90s, there were millions of people who claimed to hate Howard Stern. The people that hated him, they listened to his show more than the people who loved him. But for Pat McAfee to have 20% of the audience feel nothing towards him, that ain't good. We're talking about, 400,000 people who couldn't care less about you. There is a reason that I am putting more trust into this poll than I usually would. It's not just this poll that shows Pat McAfee is failing to resonate with the ESPN audience. The ratings, they are saying the exact same thing. Several weeks ago, I told you guys that Pat McAfee was struggling to draw an audience at ESPN. Very next day, less than 24 hours later, ESPN issued a press release claiming Pat McAfee was exceeding expectations. His YouTube numbers are amazing! Yeah, I mean, his YouTube numbers were amazing before ESPN. Pat McAfee had already proven that he could be a draw on YouTube. ESPN hired him to be a draw on television. I understand why ESPN issued this press release defending Pat McAfee. I mean, they don't want their golden goose to be on the receiving end of negative publicity. And in all fairness to Pat McAfee, he's only been on ESPN for 2 months. Who knows? By this time next year, maybe he could be a huge success. But his decision to sign with ESPN, it pissed off a lot of people. Pissed off the shit fucks because ESPN was giving millions to Pat McAfee while they were firing some of their favorite leaders at Woke United Methodist. Father Jalen Rose, former pastor, Max Kellerman, former woke scholar. Of course, ESPN refused to fire the one person who deserved to be fired above anyone else, Mark Jones. Who? Mark Jones! Mark Jones! Who continues to humiliate himself every weekend on national television with his inability to call college football games. Followers of Pat McAfee, though, they were also agitated because they felt like he was selling out to the worldwide leader in woke. They were afraid that ESPN was going to change the show. Now, there could be a combination of reasons as to why Pat McAfee is struggling to draw an audience on television. But the truth is, he is struggling. First 2 weeks of October, the show was only averaging 282,000 viewers on ESPN. On Mondays and Tuesdays, he is receiving a massive lead-in from First Take. Shannon Sharp is handing him 700,000 viewers. Rest of the week, Stephen A. Smith hands him around 4, sometimes 500,000. Those first 2 days, though, those first 2 days of the week, where are 400,000 people going? Why are they changing the channel as soon as Pat McAfee comes on ESPN? Now, obviously, none of us know the real reason. We can only speculate. But like I told you guys before, Pat McAfee does not fit at this network. Normal people, we quit watching ESPN years ago. Seriously, how many of you guys are still watching ESPN? Who is coming home from work and watching Around the Horn? Who is watching NFL Live to get illegitimate NFL analysis from the wonderful Mina Kimes? Over the years, ESPN has done so many things to piss off normal people. They have proven countless times that they are dedicated to the woke wiener. There's just no more normal people left to run off. So who is left watching ESPN today? The shit fucks, the proud members of Woke United Methodist. How many of them relate to Pat McAfee? How many of them are watching Pat McAfee? The ones that are watching him on College Gameday, they can't stand him. By signing with ESPN, Pat McAfee, he set himself up in a lose-lose. He is losing some of his loyal followers because of the direction of the show and the affiliation with ESPN, and he's losing on television because he's not drawing ratings. When he signed with ESPN back in the spring, Pat McAfee, he assured his audience that the show was never going to change. You guys remember that? Hey guys, it's me, Pat McAfee. I've decided to accept woke welfare from ESPN, but have no fear, the show is not going to change. We're just not allowed to curse anymore, but other than that, it's going to be the same show. I have never been a daily viewer of the Pat McAfee Show. Now, I'll watch some of his interviews with Aaron Rodgers. I'll catch a clip here and there, but I've never been a daily viewer of the show. Now, with that being said, the show is typically focused on football, college football, NFL. Obviously, they'll talk about March Madness during the spring, the NBA playoffs, but most of the time throughout the year, the focus of the show is mainly on football. Now, when he signed, he claimed that ESPN would not change the show. I spent 15, maybe 20 minutes this afternoon trying to find old clips of Pat McAfee talking about the WNBA on his show. I found none. Now, that doesn't mean they don't exist. That doesn't mean he hasn't talked about the WNBA in the past, but to my knowledge, it's never happened. And if it has happened, it hasn't been their primary focus. So, if ESPN has no influence on the Pat McAfee Show, then why were they analyzing the WNBA finals this week? Why were they talking about the WNBA finals? They even took it a step further and provided their betting picks on the game. Who's betting on the WNBA? I have been involved with a sports book for years now. You know how many bets we take on the WNBA? None. They're offered, no one is interested. Why is Pat McAfee dedicating a segment to the WNBA finals? I just wonder if it has anything to do with ESPN being the home of the WNBA. But you know, ESPN's not changing the show, nothing to see here. My stance on this has not changed. I just don't see this relationship working long term. Outside of Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, Pat McAfee is the highest paid personality at ESPN. He is making significantly more money than Stephen A. Smith, and he's drawing less than half his audience. You ever noticed when ESPN or Stephen A. is bragging about the ratings for First Take, they always highlight the television numbers? You ever notice that? But with Pat McAfee, they highlight the streaming audience because that is the only positive numbers that he has. Like I've said before, ESPN's not paying him millions of dollars to draw an audience on YouTube. Advertisers buying time on ESPN, they don't care about YouTube numbers. Their commercials, their ads are running on TV. How long before the pressure is applied here? How long until ESPN feels the need to make the show more fitting for their network? You tell me. Also, were you surprised by those poll results from The Athletic? Half the ESPN audience hates Pat McAfee, with 20% having no feelings about him at all. What do you guys think about Pat McAfee? Do you think he's starting to lose some of his appeal? Let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share the video. I appreciate every one of you and your support. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys tomorrow.